Hey guys, Mindy Caliguire here for our Soul Care Live, which is a weekly commitment to be with you, to be with our community, and to keep you updated on stuff going on with us and introduce you some of the most amazing friends and ministry colleagues that we have. So today, my guest is Steve Carter, my friend Steve. Come on, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mindy. It's good to see you, and I'm so excited for the world to get a chance to read "Ignite Your Soul." I got a chance to read the galley, and I can't stop thinking about those six practices. And
Oh man.
so it's an honor to be with you. A big fan of whatever you do. So
Well, thank you. Thank you. Mutually so. Mutually so. Been a fan of your work for a long time, both in writing and then also in your teaching and in your leadership. And so it's just been really fun to get to know you and our shared concern for the formation of leaders and the character from which we operate. So maybe say a little bit about your podcast that you just interviewed me on, and we're transitioning in real time, like shifting on the fly. I love it.
so I kind of host a podcast with Preaching Today called Craft and
Mm-hmm.
Character, and it's all about helping people get better at the craft of teaching,
Mm-hmm.
but always ensuring that our character leads the way.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes when it comes to platforms and preaching, we can get really, really excited about a gift or charisma.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's the soul could be really falling behind, and
Yeah.
the care, the well-being, and that's just going to drive us not into the best, most integrous and in character,
Mm-hmm.
harder right kind of choices. It's going to probably lead us down paths that are going to lead to self-sabotage and collateral damage. And so it's just a podcast to interview friends, people like you, people I respect, pastors who are really trying to do both well. So, which is
Yeah.
so much fun
Yeah.
to talk about.
Yeah. I love that. I have one friend who talks about the dynamic that you're referring to, and maybe you're aware of his work, but he talks about the front stage versus the backstage. And who you are on the front stage can get all the applause, can get all kinds of recognition, and rightly so. You might be an incredible communicator with all that charisma, but if you're not equally attending to the backstage,
Yep.
one pastor's friend said, if we're not careful, our doing can become our undoing.
Ooh,
And I know, isn't that good? Yeah.
yes.
So yeah, so thank you for your work in that, and I really I'm grateful for it, and thanks for the shout out already for the new book coming
It's
out. We're
it's
so
true.
excited.
Yeah.
It's been fun. Well, the series of who we just started these weekly things that we're inviting people into, and I'm in Boulder, Colorado, and you are in
Outside
today.
Chicago. So,
Yeah,
yep,
yeah, yeah,
yep.
yeah. And so people joining us from all kinds of places, they can drop in the chat where they're joining us from if they want to. But the book is coming out like in less than 3 weeks. And as it turns out, as we started to evolve this weekly conversation, I want to go back to one of the practices that it connects to. As it turned out, the three people who have come were first the writer that worked with me to get this out the door. Like his name is Sean Smucker. He was great. So we interviewed him. We had a great conversation. And then it just so happened that last week the publisher for Nav Press was doing a day retreat here at the ranch. And so he got to see the Garden of Desolation and walk around and enjoy and have some time by himself, which was great. And so we connected. And then you and I were talking earlier today, and you're like, hey, let's just roll into this other thing. So thank you. But it feels like there's a almost an unintended but focus on the evolution and launching of this new book. And we have the online book club that has come together, and we've got people joining from all over the world. It's so fun. But you mentioned some of the practices in the Ignite Your Soul, and one of them is the practice of delight, and figuring out like how do you embed that into your life, and that's what the whole chapter is about and goes into. But one of the practices that working teams that I've been part of or leading, wasn't my original idea, but someone else on the team had this idea to create what he called a weekly wins. And we would gather for 30 minutes at the end of a Friday afternoon, usually with a beverage of choice of some sort of. Take your pick, fill in the blank. And it was a corporate setting. We were in a tech company, and we would gather at the end of the week. And this was obviously pre-pandemic, but we still tried to do it even remotely when needed. And just everyone would reflect on the week prior and what was something we could celebrate, what was something that was a win, what was something to notice and acknowledge. And sometimes we just kind of, one day becomes the next, the week moves into the weekend, and we just don't pause to celebrate and have a moment of recognition. So one of the things we like doing on these week soul care live gatherings is to pause and reflect and invite whoever's watching to pause wherever you are. Think back on the last few days. For me right now in the US, it's a Friday afternoon. I don't know what time it is for you, but we've all had a last few days. We've all had a week, and maybe you could just, we'll be quiet for, I don't know, a few seconds. Invite God to call something to mind that is significant from this week prior. And everyone will be welcome to add that in the chat if you'd like to, whatever platform you're engaging on. I know I didn't give you a ton of time in silence, but for you, Steve, did you have any? I saw you were kind of engaging with us. What do you have a win? Do you have something that was from this past week that you might have forgotten about?
So it's interesting. I think of so much of my life in goals and wins, but it's delight has been a different kind of word for me. And even as I was reading through that chapter, it really invites like lingering, noticing, like you talked about, slowing down. And oftentimes I'm just pushing and going, and I've got deadlines, and I got to write this, and I got this sermon, I got the, and there has been a slower way over the last few years that I feel like God has really shown me. So last night we are in one of the suburbs having dinner with a group of people, and this guy who basically called this little meeting says, "Hey, before you go, the restaurant just brought back my favorite mints, and they're chocolate peppermint. I'm telling you guys, this is the greatest thing you will ever taste." And I just, like, here's like a 50, 60-year-old man just returning to his childhood, like sweets, like just, and it was beautiful. And so they bring them out, and I took one bite, and I was like, this is seriously the greatest thing I've ever, and just like the joy of like the taste. And all of a sudden I was like, man, like that verse, like taste and see that the Lord is good. Like that, like at the heart of delight, you just get these moments where you're like, you taste and see someone's joy and someone's goodness, and you taste and see creation. And so that for me was really, really special. Can I share one more that came to mind too?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, limitless here. Come on.
Okay. So this is kind of an interesting story. So you and I both like participated in a great conference and organization years and years ago. And one of my roles was I got to pick or help choose and kind of propose different speakers. And I always wanted Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski, to be at this conference. And we were really close to getting him one year. And I was in California, and I open up my phone, and I start to see my friends who are posting pictures of them with Coach K, who happens to be speaking at the conference this year. And a bit of FOMO comes over. I'm like, oh man, I wish I could have been there. I wish I could have met him. And as I'm walking into the hotel, and I'm just like, Lord, just see me, like, just like, oh man, like I don't want this to be a big deal. I don't want it to affect me. I love that Coach K was there. Bless it, bless it, bless it. And as I walk in, the one coach that I would want to meet that I've not met more than Coach K was the former Michigan football coach, Jim Harbaugh, who now coaches the LA Chargers. And he's right there. And
Literally, as you're feeling this and thinking
as I'm feeling it. And it was like, and I walk up and I just have this 7-minute conversation with Coach Harbaugh. And as I leave the conversation and I get on the elevator to go up, it was like this moment of God just saying, I see you, bud. I see you. I see you. And it just, for so long, I would just be like, oh, that's a crazy happenstance, like coincidence. But then it's like, no, like God, it's like Zephaniah 3:17, the Lord God is with you. He's mighty to save. He takes great delight in you. He rejoices over you with singing. He'll quiet you and remind you of his love. Like to actually experience those moments where God delights and gives you a little joy and desire of your heart. It was just, those were the two memories. Mintz and
those
Jim
are
Harbaugh.
beautiful. I love them. I love them both. I was almost tasting that the chocolate peppermint as you were describing it. It sounds very good. Maybe afterwards, let us know where that restaurant is. Good. Yeah. As I was reflecting as well, this land, we're so keen to invite and hold space for leaders here, and even the name Whisper Ranch, the hope that people would encounter that whisper of God, even when they're in a season like in, 1 Kings 19, where the leaders get tired. We run away. We need to go hide for a while. We find ourselves in caves, and God meets us there, not in the earthquake and in the storm and in the wind, but actually in the gentle whisper. And so as I was pausing, thinking, it was actually just yesterday that someone was here from, I refer to them with great affection as like hair on fire leadership environments, really very highly missional, wildly, successful in the sense of the fruit of these ministries. And we bless that and love it and want that to be coming from overflow. Right. And there was a leader here who we were spending just some time getting to know each other. And then I needed to leave early and just said, take your time, just go out, encounter God, and who knows what God might do. And later they texted me and just thanked me, that we had some time together, but mostly that, and it said very specifically what they had encountered from God. Not like too much information, but just it was this kind of connection with the Lord that opened up something that had felt a little stuck. And for me, those are feelings of, so many things are uncertain. Like, how is this going to unfold? What are we doing next? We don't know anything about running places like this. But we know a lot about tired and heavy-hearted leaders. And so when someone comes and can encounter God through this space, it's just been a really sweet gift. So that was a gift for us, for me, this week. So those are some fun wins. I don't know if I have a food-related one. I should think about that. I think I had hot dogs last night. That wasn't too exciting. So one of the other things we love to do in this, in our time is really just focus on some of the things that are current for you. And I know one of the things that's relatively current for you is a new book that you have released, Grieve, Breathe, Receive, which you can't say too fast. Inherently slows me down.
Yes.
What's that?
Everyone says that. Everyone's like, you can't, it like slows you down.
It
or it's
does.
like the thing beneath the thing or some other title. You can say, really, it's like Grieve, Breathe, so it's always fun to hear people like say it.
Yeah. But say more about like, where did the genesis of those actual words? And I'm sure you were knowing what a wordsmith and how actively you pursue great language. That's no accident that they kind of work together, but why those three?
So two kind of responses. One was, 2018, a lot of life, similar to 2021 for you with the wildfire. It just something you didn't see coming, and it just kind of I felt like what do
What
I
is
do?
this? Yeah. Yeah.
And I ended up stepping out of my job, and I remember like going to Madison, Wisconsin, and my whole family's up there, and I get up early and I just go for a walk. And I just needed a word from the Lord. I don't know if you ever had those moments where you're like, God, what did I just do? I just resigned. I don't have a trust fund. I don't know what's next. Like, I'm like, what did I just do? And I was like, literally, like, I need a word, Lord. And I pulled out this old prayer called the Cadets Prayer and read it, and I was just hoping God would give me something, and it was kind of silent, and so I kept walking, and I was right next to the Capitol in Madison, and I sat down at a bench, and I just said, Lord, please, 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 and those three words came to me: grieve, breathe, receive. And I went to a coffee donut shop, and I just wrote, I have to grieve what is, grieve what I thought it was going to be, grieve how key people let me down. I have to breathe in new mercies, exhale all bitterness and resentment and anger and unforgiveness. And I have to receive what I need to learn, receive if there's anything I need to own, and receive who Christ wants me to become because of all of this. And that kind of became this like mantra for me as my family and I were just trying to pick up the pieces. We're going to grieve, breathe, receive. And we moved from Chicago to Arizona. And one day I was hiking, and I got to the top of Camelback Mountain. I'm looking out all over Phoenix, and it dawned on me that grieve, breathe, receive actually felt a lot like Holy Weekend. Like Good Friday when you are in grief, and Jesus didn't deserve it. And oftentimes the grief that many of people watching right now, they didn't deserve the grief. They didn't deserve the betrayal. They didn't deserve the medical report. They didn't deserve this. And Jesus didn't deserve it. And, with Silent Saturday, the disciples are trying to figure out, what does this mean? And it has kind of that Hebrew 40 years in the desert vibe. Like you're kind of like in between death and resurrection, or Egypt and the promised land. And then it's the surprise, something you didn't see coming on Sunday that you just get to receive. And all of a sudden I began to recognize, as I was trying to learn, I knew how to achieve, I didn't know how to grieve. The more that I began to lean into it, I just began to get really curious of, which day of Holy Weekend am I in right now? I feel like I'm feeling Friday, and get on Twitter and, I feel a little Saturday, and then a short little breath prayer, Lord, surprise me. And there would be moments of just resurrection, moments of healing, moments of just that Sunday morning filled with hope. And I got to discover what 1 Thessalonians 4 says, that we grieve with hope. We're Friday and Sunday people, and everything in between. We can mourn with those who mourn Friday and rejoice with those who rejoice, and everything in between. And that's something I didn't know how to do pre-2018, but I think as you say it in your subtitle, some of the most difficult stuff can be a light to our flourishing, and even something I would not wish on my worst enemy really helped shape and form me to become more of who I think Christ intended me to be.
Yeah, and you have the diagram that shows change in the
Yes.
center,
Yes.
that as we embrace these modalities, we open ourselves up to the transformation.
Yeah.
And can you, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, no, I think one of the things I always will say is my definition for grief is honoring what comes up when change shows up. And it could be even like good grief. I mean, some people watching right now, probably in the last week or two, dropped their kid off at college, and there's a good grief there. You're launching them like rockets into the world, and you're an empty nester for the first time. There's a good grief. Some of you just dropped your child off at kindergarten, and there's a good grief. And so, but it's all change. And how do you honor that change without kind of like stuffing it, suppressing it, just really giving it space to actually feel it and bring that before the Lord?
Give us a snippet on how you define a breath prayer and maybe some examples of breath prayers that you've found helpful.
That's great. So for me, it's a short 1 or 2 sentence, inhale, exhale, kind of a line that just almost centers me again, or just reminds me. This will feel a little bit comical, but you know, where I often can feel a lot of anxiety is when I pull into the Home Depot parking lot, because I don't know how to fix anything. I just don't like. My wife knows how to do stuff. I don't. And I always have this short little breath prayer where I inhale, Father, or I say, Lord, and then just as I exhale, Father me through this. Like, it's just like, Lord, Father me through this. And and he always brings me someone in an orange apron, usually in their 60s, who knows and has a bunch of kindness for someone who doesn't know how to fix anything, and without shame. And so it's like these little short kind of prayers that just center you. I love asking God questions in the prayer. Lord, what's the next best right step? As I walk into a space, God's already there. And if God's already there, it's like brimming with redemptive potential. May I see what you want me to see. May I hear what you want me to hear. May I meet who you want me to meet. Like, it's just like certain these phrases that will just come to mind in that cadet's prayer. It's so beautiful. It says, may we be committed to the harder right over the lesser wrong. May we live above the common level of life. And I just think some of those phrases or scripture verses, like, Lord, let me taste and see that you are good today. It just grounds you and centers you, and it's been really helpful for me.
Do you pick like a breath prayer that is something that you would like intentionally want to be calling to mind in a particular season, or like do you write about it in a journal? Like, how do you formalize it?
Yeah, that's really, really
if
great.
At all?
So I think, Dallas Willard would often talk about VIM, vision, intention, and means. And so there have been times where, for 6 months or 90 days, I'll just kind of have like a vision statement, which is, I think most church leaders have or know the vision of their church, but they don't have a specific formation vision. And so for me, for a season, it was, a life anchored in Jesus is one that has nothing to prove, nothing to lose, and nothing to hide. And so I started to spend time, and before I would go into a teaching, remember, a life anchored in Jesus is one that has nothing to prove. Like, you have it all. I have nothing to lose. The kingdom is right before me.
Right
I have
here.
nothing to hide. I'm forgiven. So just like learning that, it was connected. And so that became one of those means or methods that I could intentionally try to embody my vision.
Yeah, yeah. For me, I can connect to this a ton because of a season, back when I had my really severe burnout, which again, the book sort of weaves between the narrative of the fires here in Boulder and then my own burnout and the journey that God took me on coming out of that. So merciful. But one of the seasons I was introduced to the concept of a breath prayer. I don't think I had known what that was prior to that. And as you said, an inhale and an exhale, like something you could say like in one breath. And I think it was Brennan Manning was the person that I heard this from. And the breath prayer was just simply, Jesus, I belong to you.
Ooh.
Jesus, I belong to you. And that became a very present part of my like daily life, because there were worries that I was facing that became almost obsessive thoughts. Like I couldn't stop thinking about the thing that I was so worried about. And I had friends who were in 12-step programs of various addiction type things, and they were telling me about the practices that they were putting in place to depend on God's grace, one day at a time, all these different phrases that were essential to their recovery. And I'm like, oh, I'm not addicted to anything. And I'm like, you cannot stop thinking about this one thing.
Right.
And you're getting yourself in a pretty bad tailspin every time you get spun up about this. What are you getting out of that? Why is that? Like, what is the addictive thing? I mean, getting into something really kind of personal here, but I started to go, oh, I am returning to this argument, this debate, this problem again and again and again in my thinking, and I can't seem to get myself out of it. And it was that breath prayer that when I would start obsessing about this thing that was just terrible, and again, it doesn't even matter if I was right or wrong. It was the fact that I could not stop thinking about it. And of course I was right. No.
So good.
See, here I am like 20, 30 years later. But that was the aha for me, is like, I would get obsessed with what was right or wrong. And it's like, no, you are not present. You are in your head somewhere else. Like, you're driving down the road at 70 miles per hour or something, but you are way far away and you are unable to stop yourself from thinking about this. That was hard for me to admit to myself. And then I started to go, well, you must be getting something out of this. What are you getting out of this? And it caused me to reflect, and, because journaling has been a big part of my soul care. So I was like, what is this, God? Help me see what's going on. And I came to find out, well, you know what? When you're arguing in your head about a thing, there's no one to tell you you're wrong. It sort of fueled my like self-righteousness. And it gave me a hit of feeling like I was productive. I was actually doing something, which couldn't have been further. I mean, it was the ultimate fallacy, right? I mean, Steve, you're like, I don't think I want Mindy to be my friend anymore. It was so crazy. Yeah. But I found myself incapable of stopping my obsessive thinking about it until I started using those thoughts when they would come to me as a trigger to prayer.
Yes.
Oh no, Jesus, I belong to you. Jesus, I belong to you. Which in a way, it has the same effect as the prayer you just said. Yeah. I don't need to prove anything. I don't need to, whatever the other two were. Yeah. Jesus, I belong to you. Yeah. And what a beautiful gift is the Mindy, truth of those words.
This is what you always do. And you do this in Ignite Your Soul. Like, it's just like you take these like so human experiences that, where we're having those anger fantasies and we're replaying and, if I see them again, I'm going to say this, and you always bring it back to how we can integrate and help our soul, like actually care for our soul and allow God to care for our soul and be reminded. And, I think what's amazing is even in your book, I'm curious, like how those practices, because you did your little snap fingers, like when you get a trigger and it's like a trigger to prayer. But those 6 practices that you walked through, were there triggers before, like, attention? Like, if was there something that'd be like, oh, I gotta practice attention?
I think the attention one, if we could just like, we can talk about that one first. I think the attention one more evolved over time. I think it was stuff like that made me realize how inattentive I was to what was actually going on around me, which is really sad when you recognize that as a mom, and you're like, I've been reading this book and I know this book so well, I can just read it and I'm in my head on some other thing. Yep. And these little precious boys are right here. Like, how about being present here? And I think it was a wake-up call to me in that season to realize how inattentive I was to many things that were God included, inattentive to God, to what God was doing, or some of the dearest people around me. And so getting to a point where I could make that increasingly my intention is to pay attention, because it's easy to get lost in your own narrative of
Yeah.
what matters or what's going on, and lose. Yeah. So I think that one, the page, the person, and the plan that is introduced in there is ways to stay alert.
Yes.
Stay alert to the well-being of your own soul. Stay alert to the activity of God around you. Stay alert to even how you're doing. Those things I think evolved, but there are. I have used triggers, and I'll use them. I know that means a really harder thing in many other contexts, so I don't use that term lightly, but that's not at all what I mean here. I mean physical things that cause me to remember. So an obsessive thought becomes a reminder to engage a breath prayer, an invitation, a trigger. Another one is, and I think the Israelites, and the way God orchestrated the structural things into the Hebrew culture. You probably are more of a scholar around this than I am, but like the mezuzah on the door, it's like every time you pass in and out of that door, you're reminded God is one. This is who we worship, and God is present. And the tassels and things like that. Like, why did they have to wear all that stuff? Because we're so relentlessly physical. And so another form of prayer that has been important to me over the years, you could call it practicing the presence of God, or Thomas Kelly talks about it as inward prayer, is my desire, is my intention to stay in this ongoing, what Willard would have called the ongoing conversation with God. That is the fundamental invitation that we all have in all circumstances, to be aware of and responsive to God in real time. But we forget. We forget about God, and then we forget that we forgot. And we're walking between meetings, and we're thinking about the next thing we need to do. And we forget about this ongoing conversation with God. And so another thing that has helped me pay attention is like I'll assign an environment thing, like a particular bridge on a path, or a pond that we would drive past on the way to the kids' school, or a threshold at the building that we worked in. And it was like that threshold had new meaning for me, that it would prompt me to remember to keep talking with God about this ongoing conversation. So I think those kinds of little reminders are not a sign of like disproportionate weakness or inability to pay attention. They're just, we're human.
Yes. Yes.
What do we need as a reminder to help us pay attention?
Well, and we're so good at remembering what we ought to forget and forgetting what we ought to remember,
Come on.
And I just think like having those moments, and I always know a book is a good book, because as an author, what you really want is just a person to turn one more page. Just turn one more page. Because if they turn one more page and another page, they're going to literally be able to finish the book. And so I know a book's a good book when I just want to keep turning the page and I finish it.
Yeah.
I know it's a good book when I want to give it away. And I know it's a good book when I want to like actually read it again and reflect on it. And those are kind of like three ways. But I think about that with that ongoing conversation with God. Am I inviting God to like turn the page, and am I delighting in that next paragraph and that next sentence and that next chapter of the day? And sometimes it's not. I forget I'm reading. I forget I'm living. I forget He's with me. So I think that's an interesting piece. But the other one that I was thinking about as you were talking about this, I was talking with Diane Langberg, and she is a therapist and has done basically 50 plus years working with abuse survivors.
Oh, man.
And I just asked her, I said, how do you do this day in and day out? Because you are dealing with some of the most difficult and painful forms of abuse. And she said, I have to be relentless in my practice of delight. And I have to go after a hard day and just spend minutes. And when I mean minutes, I mean 30 minutes just looking at the garden, looking at every flower, watering it, going slow, like delighting that even with all the hard stuff, something can bloom. Something, and as I was reading that delight chapter and practicing, I just heard, here's this, for so many of the people who are watching, like and experiencing this, they're carrying so much, and just to slow down and notice, slow down and delight, like you talk about, is just what a gift to be reminded that we're in the presence of God.
Steve, I've never thought about our relationship with God as him authoring a book that we get to read, the author and perfecter of our faith, right? And as you were saying that, the thing that makes me want to turn a page, I can think of like books right now that have been that for me. And it just makes me think kind of back to the way we started this conversation, that God gave you one of those page turns when you walked into that hotel.
Yeah. Yep.
Said, I see you.
Yep.
I delight in you. Come on, Steve. Let's keep going.
Yep.
You can turn the page. Oh,
Yep.
I love that.
Yes.
I love it. All right. Well, Ingrid has dropped some brave thoughts in here. She just said, thank you both for the gift of your presence, for sharing what it means to follow God. Through your personal stories, you help me have faith. Hard times are part of my growth. Amen. Well, I could keep talking with you forever, and we've done it occasionally, but I can't end a conversation with you without thanking you once again for a way that you cared for my soul when you were a pastor of our church. And we knew each other, but not terribly well at that point. We ended up working on a project together in the future, but at this point, it was the day our friend, mentor, influence, Dallas Willard had passed away from cancer that May of 2013. And the news of it was starting to get out, and it was heavy and hard, and it was in the morning, if I recall, and you, or when the news came out, and you called me or emailed or something and said, can I just come down to your office? And kind of along the lines of grieve and breathe and receive, although many years before either of us were really dealing with those topics as we have had opportunity now. You just came and sat, and we didn't have a lot of words, as I recall it. And there was just a shared acknowledgement that, oh, there's been a loss. Yeah. It's heavy. And I know I've thanked you before, but I don't know. I just felt like I wanted to say thank you again. Thanks. The shared understanding of the significance of that moment, the shared entering into just grief. Yeah. Let's just be sad.
Can I show you one drawing really quick?
Of course.
Okay.
I like drawings. What is that?
So this is an artist's definition of grief, and it's just like holding what is no longer there, and just like this drawing. And I was able to get this original, and it's just that process of literally just being able to come alongside it, hold space, and and that was one of those holy moments that somehow, where it felt like there was a big loss. There was also a deep connection, and it made it a little bit easier to make sense of and walk through it.
It did. It just made it easier. It helped it helped me to just recognize this is big. This is big. It's a big loss,
Yeah.
and we didn't need to put a bow on it. We didn't need to say silly things that sometimes people say in hard circumstances, and meaning well, I'm sure. But so once again, thank you. Thanks for showing us that that picture as well. I guarantee there's somebody that is going to speak to them today.
Well,
So,
and one last thing, and then I'll let you go, is honoring is a way in the Jewish tradition to take it farther. So like when you honor your father and mother, you are taking what they handed to you farther. Some of us were given broken batons, some of us were given really great batons, but it's to take it farther. But I also think when you honor a mentor, you build on their work and continue to create avenues and on ramps to experience what the work is. And you know, I think Mindy, you have just done this. I think in just with the work of Dallas, like the work of others, like really, you know, obviously how God has inspired you, but just in this book, Ignite Your Soul, like it is and it is a great way to honor some of those that have come before us, but also take it farther to make it so wildly accessible and possible for us to have an integrated soul. And so, friends,
Thanks,
please,
Steve.
if you have not pre-ordered Ignite Your Soul, do it. I'm telling you, it's such a good book. Mindy did not ask me to say this. She's probably very uncomfortable
I
right now.
really,
But I can pitch someone else's book. I don't like talking about mine, but I will pitch someone else's book any single day, especially when it's a good book like that book, Ignite Your Soul. So thanks, friend, for letting me
Steve,
be with you.
thank
You're
you.
awesome.
Godspeed. You have a great rest of your weekend. Great rest
Awesome.
of your day.
Grace
Thanks
and
for
peace.
joining us. Take care.